All right, hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Antler and AFCO Podcast, the podcast for new and adult onset hunters. My name's Vince. I'm going to be your host, and this is a show where I, a newer, pretty inexperienced hunter, bring on people from the hunting world who know a whole hell of a lot more than I do. And as I ask them questions and I learn new things, I want to pass that info right along to you guys. So this week, we're again going to be kind of videography, photography, heavily focused. Not only is it because it's something I'm into right now, but I think a lot of us like to video our own hunts. We like to take pictures out in the nature, in the wild. And I just want to, maybe we can get some tips and tricks to make our own content better. So who better to ask than somebody who does it professionally? All right, guys. So help me welcome to the show, Keagan Keddell. Keagan, how you doing today, man?
Good, man. Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very excited. Like we were talking about off camera. I'm excited to. I don't know how my listeners are going to take it, but last week on the show we had Sam Soholt, and then now we've got you this week. So I'm cramming photography and videography down their throats.
Dang.
But yeah. I told you I try to learn from the people that I want to emulate, and I've been fortunate enough to get you guys to come on the show. But yeah, so the way. Just so you guys know, the way I met Keagan, well, I haven't met in person, but the way I met him online, basically, I put out that reel saying, like, you know, if you're an older guy hunting, you got to hunt differently. You're not always, you don't have to be that wild and free 26-year-old living in the back of a van going cross country. And Eric from OK's Hunter, I think, tagged you in that. Mm-hmm. And we kind of started laughing about that. And then, you know, one thing led to the other. We just talked a little bit, and now here we are. So I'm excited about that. Just to give people who may not know who you are, what's your kind of background? Let them know what you do exactly.
So, I mean, background's kind of a lot of things, but for the main part now, I'm a photographer, videographer, kind of travel the country. I started big into waterfowl hunting, kind of. You know, I always say made a name for myself with duck dogs, basically. And then, you know, now I'm filming a few different TV shows and just traveling around all over the country as much as possible. You know, Eric called me out because I basically live out of the back of my truck and travel, be able to do as much as I can. And for me, it works. So, yeah, I guess that's the quick and short version. We can get into the rest later.
So how old are you?
I'll be 29 next month.
So you're close enough. You are that wild and free, we'll call it 29-year-old. But it's cool because, I mean, you are doing what I think a lot of us out there, whether you know we're younger, or me who, you know, I'm 36, so I'm kind of in that middle range, or older guys who just they just grew up, they hunted, they lived life, and now, you know, they have families. You're kind of doing the gig that, like, everybody wishes they could do. And it's fun to watch because it's fun to see all the places you get to go. And then your pictures and stuff. Like, for me, trying to learn photography and learn, you know, how to set up a shot and how to compose a shot and use lighting, all this other stuff. Your pictures are they're excellent, and I've studied them a lot. Yeah, since I started talking to you, I've gone through your Instagram a lot, just kind of as I'm learning to edit photos and stuff and kind of go through it. You're one of the go-tos for me to kind of be like, okay, so how does he do it? So I'm excited to have you on. Hopefully we can get a couple tips. I wouldn't say tricks because it's not really tricks. It's really learning how to do things and then executing it over time with experience. But maybe you can give us some tips on, for those of us who aren't quite at a super high level yet, maybe help us make better content because we suck at it, I guess is what I'm trying to say in a fancy way.
Yeah, for sure.
But, well, let's say I'm going to say a quick prayer before we get in, and then we'll dig in a little deeper into kind of growing up, how you got a camera in your hands, things like that. So, Lord, I thank you again for another chance to record a podcast and have just such a great guest on the show. You have blessed me and the show with many, many great guests. And I think that just if I take a step back and look at it, while I have the temptation to think, yeah, I'm getting these guests, you're providing those because those guests like this and like we've had bring more people to this platform, which ultimately, like I always say, is number one, to glorify you first, and then everything hunting comes behind it. So I just want to give you thanks for this project that you've put in front of me and that you've continued to drive me to do. I want to thank you for Keagan. I thank you for his life and all the amazing experiences he's been able to experience, and all the knowledge that he has that he's willing to come on here and share. I'm very grateful for that as well. So I ask that you would be with us in this conversation, be with us the rest of the show and the rest of the night. I know you will, and we thank you for Jesus, and we ask all this in his great name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So we already got the who you are and what you do out of the way. How did it all start? Did you grow up hunting? Did you grow up in the outdoors? What did that kind of look like? How did you first get into the outdoors? And then we'll jump to how did you get into the outdoors with a camera?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a roller coaster of a story there. You know, I grew up hunting and fishing since I was a little kid. My dad's huge hunter fisher, so always chasing the outdoors with him. And then, you know, eventually it was right before high school graduation. I got hired on the charter boat. So I grew up on Lake Michigan in Door County in Wisconsin. And I was first mating for one of my dad's best friends on the salmon boat. So the day of my high school graduation was my first trip, and actually kind of ran long. I almost missed my high school graduation.
Would have been worth it.
Yeah, I mean, great for me. As you can imagine, my mom wasn't super happy, but
right,
you know, she probably also isn't happy that I tell that story constantly. But yeah, so I was a fishing guide for, you know, up until last year was the first year that I didn't guide fishing since I turned 18. So, you know, 9 seasons of it.
Yeah.
Guided 5 years on Lake Michigan in the summer. Guided total of 9 years ice fishing there on Green Bay, and then there was 4 years up in Alaska guiding fly fishing. And that Alaska was what ended up kicking off the photography, just to be able to show people what I was seeing. You know, most people from the Midwest and the Northeast can understand what salmon fishing's like and just fishing in general. But once you get out into Alaska, you know, stories can't tell that. You know, it's so pretty. Yeah. It's so beautiful. It's very hard for me to tell you and your audience what a brown bear looks like at 10 yards. But I can show you a picture, and you can go, oh, that's how big their teeth are.
Yeah.
So that really kicked off my photography stuff. And then, you know, I got a camera in my hand, and I just fell in love and kind of gave everything else up to chase taking pictures, basically.
So how did you actually... So that's kind of, you got a camera just to be able to show what's going on. What was your first camera? Were you still, I'm trying to think if you're saying it's like 9, was it like 9 years ago, or how long have you been doing this?
No, so the first paid gig I had was spring of 2020. So really it hasn't been that long. And I had bought a camera the year before and just got obsessed with it. You know, it was a Nikon D3500. It was a $500 camera, $600 camera with 2 kit lenses. It was on sale at Best Buy. And I had kicked around buying a camera for years. But what I didn't realize at the time, you know, was they weren't waterproof. They were very expensive, and they were complicated. So I had gone into camera stores and just looking it around and never figured it out. And then I literally went to Best Buy that day. I was with my best friend Casey, or one of them, and basically was like, hey, dude, do not let me leave here without buying a camera. I don't care what it is. Like, do not let me leave here. I need to do this. I've been kicking it around, and I haven't bit the bullet to spend the money. And then I did it, and like, I don't think you've got a camera out of my hand since. Yeah. And it just became an obsession. And I loved learning it. It was a new experience every time I picked it up. You know, even that night, I sat in his apartment and took pictures of his, ducks that were up on the wall and deer that were on the wall for hours, sitting on the couch, just playing with the dials and going, what do these do? What does this do? And then I got obsessed with watching YouTube videos and stumbled into people like Peter McKinnon and that rabbit hole of people and podcasts and different things. There's a really great, it's more themed towards wedding photographers, but a gentleman named Ben Hartley.
Okay.
He has a phenomenal podcast for photographers and photographers in business and kind of just general, and has some super interesting guests. But like stuff like that. And then I consumed every piece of content you could throw at me. And quickly, that became all I did. I was guiding still at the time, so was bringing my camera with me there. And then, a couple years in Alaska where I was guiding fly fishermen and photographers. And then, so I've, have 5 months of every single day shooting thousands of pictures. And I had eventually bought a D850 for that first spring in Alaska and a Nikon 200 to 500. So I had good equipment, and I knew that I would regret it if I didn't go up there with at least adequate equipment. What I didn't know at the time was that I bought like the best camera that I could have bought for that scenario.
Yeah.
Which was also why it was a few $1,000s. But, that's the camera, one of the cameras I still use today. And that thing has been through absolute living hell. First day I owned it, I broke one of the top screens that gives you some information. Second day I owned it, I dropped it in a river. And, that was 3.5 years ago. And that thing's been slammed around underwater more times than I can count and still trucking. So
that's the worst part too. I just have the one right now, the A6400, and God, you baby the hell out of it. And I remember the first time I can totally relate to your story of like getting it in your hands and like, okay, we're going to get out of auto and we're going to mess around with things. Mm-hmm. And immediately it humbles you because you're like, I have no idea what any of these things are. There's not even that many buttons on the A6400, but it's like, this is ridiculous. So yeah, you go on that YouTube rabbit hole and then, you feel it's funny because you feel like you watch like a video on like how to set your aperture, and then you have to watch your ISO and all this other stuff, and you get like this feeling of like, I got this figured out. That's not that hard. Photography's not that bad. And then you go try to do it and you blow it. You can't frame a shot right. You can't do anything, but it's very, very addictive. But back to like, I had that Sony and I babied the crap out of it. And the first time I took it into the woods, it got some mud on it, and I'm trying to be careful. And I finally had to just be like, all right, this is a tool, and I needed to treat it like it's a tool. Cause otherwise if I'm,
for sure,
you're going to screw things up even worse if you're trying. It's kind of like, you get a new phone or you get like a new watch, and you're really hyper conscious of not bumping it into something or dropping it, and then it makes you do it. You've almost got to kind of just treat it like it's not there. Otherwise, I feel like for me, I screw things up the more I try to baby it. But yeah, so when you get when you got into the YouTube side and everything else, did you have any other interests in photography other than like wildlife? Like, have you gone down like a macro route or street photography or portrait, anything like that? Or have you kind of just solely focused on the outdoor space with that?
So when I started, obviously hunting and fishing has been, now it's a decade of being in the industry and, coming up on 29 years of doing it. So obviously that's been the driving passion. I came up in the age of YouTube hunting shows and everything. And, my buddies and I would film all of our hunts, and I was always a part of it. And it was always something that I was active in, but it was a different buddy of mine, my buddy Matt, who was kind of ran the show, and he was the guy who edited, and he put it all together. And, you know, it was on GoPros and a bunch of cameras that they haven't made for 8-10 years now. And we were always doing it. So it just kind of led hand in hand. But when I picked up my camera and started really diving into it, it was anything I could get my hands on. You know, I'd walk around with my musician friends, and we'd go downtown of little towns. We'd take pictures all over the place, and it was anything that I could possibly take a picture of, anything that I could practice, you know, different focal lengths, using different lenses, practicing with different shutter speeds. I was super obsessed with night photography for a long time. I don't know if you saw that picture of my cabin that I posted on Father's Day.
Yep. Yeah, that's an amazing picture.
That was with a $500 camera, a $150 lens, and I had no clue what I was doing. I thought I was trying to take a time lapse, was what I was trying to do. And so it was snowing all day, and the snow was gradually building. So in my head at the time, not knowing anything, I just went outside every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes, and I'd take a picture. And I thought that I could just put those, you know, throughout the day together and make a time lapse. What ended up happening is that was like 1 second worth of time lapse. You know? But it ended up with some cool pictures, and, you know, it just became trial and error. You know, I'm at the level of halfway decent that I am because I've messed up more than I care to admit, think about, or remember.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of times we say this in the hunting world, you know, when you're a new hunter, like I have been told by experienced people, and I'm kind of the camp of when you're brand new, you need to be hyper aggressive. Almost so aggressive that, like, you need to know that before you walk in the woods, go in there knowing you're going to blow the hunt and just be okay with that. And then go blow the hunt. Because in those moments where you jump deer, whatever you might do, you get a chance to really learn some valuable information from that. Whereas, you know, in my first year of hunting, I was super conservative to the point where I wasn't even...
Sorry, my bag
as long as nobody's breaking in.
No. Scared the crap out of me, though.
Yeah, no shit. Scared me. But no, like in my first year, I was so conservative that I wasn't even in the game because I was staying so far back. I was so careful. I wasn't even anywhere near where deer would be, you know, but yeah. So, and I've kind of noticed the same thing with me. A lot of my coolest pictures have been accidental, and then you can, some of them you don't really even have to edit. Like some of my favorite pictures that I've taken of like John Deere equipment, I was driving and just snapping out the side of the window with a real high shutter speed and just happened to catch some pretty cool pictures that way.
Oh, heck yeah.
But you know, just like you said, screwing around with everything, screw around with your shutter speed and screw around with different techniques and like learn what they do. And then, you know, that's kind of how I learned how to shoot like a waterfall type thing. Like I have a picture from Total Archery Challenge. They had a waterfall, and I learned how to get that nice flowy look with the low shutter speed because I was screwing around one day and took a picture. I think I accidentally set the shutter speed really low, and I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And then, of course, you go look it up online, like, why did this happen? And then like, well, shit, that's really cool. So do you get the chance to hunt very much anymore, or are you pretty much solely the cameraman?
Well, I mean, there's two ways to look at that. One, I probably hunt more than most people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just not behind the gun or the bow or whatever. But yeah, for the most part, like my hunting is so much more behind the camera. You know, I'll be behind the gun during waterfowl season a good bit. Or if I'm still guiding, you know, I'll guide some hunting trips. But that's pretty much it. And honestly, to a lot of degree, I don't care to be the person behind the gun. You know, last year, big game season, elk season, I've filmed more elk encounters than most people get in their life. And I don't say
Right.
that to brag. I solely say that because I had a camera in my hand, I was able to be in places that most people will never see or hear of. And it is a blessing to me to be able to do that, and I'm so super thankful for it. But opportunities like that, I don't need to be behind the bow. I don't need to be the guy that shoots the animal. You know, I got to film it. I get to relive it. I get to put it all together, and then I get to present a hunt that somebody was there on, but they saw a third of what happened. Now they get to relive that moment.
Right.
And to me, that's way cooler. You know, being able to film stuff like that is unbelievable. And then I get to relive it too at the same time that I wouldn't get to do if I was actually the one pulling the trigger.
Yeah. And I mean, that's really, for the most part, kind of like you were alluding to, I don't know, what would you say, 5% of like the fun of hunting would be getting the animal. The other 95% is the experience in totality. And it's like, you know, let's say you elk hunt, you go out there for a week, you do or don't get something, and it's done and it's over with. What you were saying, like, you get to be out there, you don't need a tag to take pictures. You get to go elk hunt the whole entire time. You know, you get to experience bugling bulls and all that other awesome stuff that everyone just wishes they could experience. And, you know, it's aside from the part of you're not taking home meat, you get to experience every other awesome part of the hunt over and over and over. I think you're really winning on that deal. You know what I mean? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, for me, it's the experience and getting to do it and getting to see a different part of the world. And it's unbelievable. And it's something that everybody should be able to see. But the advantage that I have is because I have the camera, I can still be able to show all the people that won't get to see it or can't see it what it is.
Yeah.
Which is the whole reason why I started doing this in the first place.
Yeah. And in terms of hunting experience, if you were to get behind a bow or a gun again, I mean, think of all the, like, if you were to total it up, think of all the extra years worth of experience you have. Like, and like you were saying, when you talk about being a hunter, that doesn't have to mean that you go kill something. You're still, when you're trying to take a picture, you're still hunting down that animal. You still have to play by all the same rules, you know? And it is just as rewarding to get. It might be even, I mean, really, honestly, if you were to ask me right now, I mean, granted, I'm still new in the honeymoon phase with it, I would almost be more excited, like during turkey season, to get a really cool close-up picture of like a strutting gobbler than I would to shoot it. Like, I think that would almost be more rewarding to me right now anyway.
Oh, without a doubt.
There was something that you posted today and that I was talking to one of my buddies about. I want to kind of expand on this thought because I think it's a really interesting thought for, I guess, professionals. And let me preface for everyone listening before we start, I'm not knocking anybody because I'm still new, and just because I'm new and I have a camera, I'm doing this stuff, I'm still very new and do these things too. But when we look at photography, videography, social media, things like that, you had posted a thing today that was basically like, what do you guys think about templates? And it's similar to a conversation I had with my buddy who's a graphic designer, as well as a photographer, videographer. How do you feel about the explosion of things like, you know, all these different AI technologies that are coming out in terms of like in Lightroom and Photoshop? We have podcast editing apps. We have all the phone apps like, well, we got CapCut, Adobe Express, even filters in Instagram. There are all of these things out there, like you were saying about templates, that anybody given 2 weeks to a month of practice with these things can produce pretty decent content with zero experience, zero knowledge, zero background. How do you feel about as a professional who you've taken the time to learn, you've put in the miles, you do things, I don't want to say the right way, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely not the right way.
Yeah. But like, in terms of like knowing how to get in, like for me, knowing how to use Premiere Pro to make an actual video versus like an app that just drop your videos here and the app does all of the fun stuff for you. How do you feel about this technology that's coming out?
I kind of have a lot of thoughts on it, and from both sides of it. In 100% honesty, like I was editing videos on Instagram's platform for a couple years because Premiere Pro was a pain. It didn't make English to me. And while there's plenty of resources out there, I didn't have the time to put in the middle of hunting season to sit down and learn it. But I could take clips, I could scrub through footage and I could go, all right, this is a good clip. This is a good clip. This is a good clip. I could put it on my phone and then I could play with it whenever I wanted. Had templates come out a few years ago, I'd have been all over that. Absolutely. Yeah. And like yesterday, I downloaded CapCut for the first time to see what it was all about.
Yeah. It's wild.
It's unbelievable. And I only downloaded it because of Eric from OK as Hunter was talking about all the stuff that he does with it. And you watch all of his hilarious stuff and you're like, all right, I got to look into this. But like, it's great. It's neat to be able to take clips and blah, 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 and put that all together and go, all right, I've got a pretty neat video, especially in the world of all of these trends and where all you see is the same damn thing over and over again. Like, I get it. On the flip side of that, I also kind of feel like it takes the fun out of it, almost in the way that digital cameras took the fun out of film, the way that mirrorless cameras take the fun out of DSLRs, kind of in the same way that, an iPhone takes the fun out of an actual picture. An iPhone takes an incredible picture, for example. My camera can take the same image, and I have to do a heck of a lot more work to get that.
Right.
It kind of is that like balance between technology, the way that we feel that it should be, and everything else. Then on the flip side of that, it's another tool that everybody should use. It's a leg up. It's an advantage. And there's no reason that you should scoff at being able to turn content faster in today's world, especially those of us that aren't producing movies and full-on TV shows. It's social media content. The name of the game is pushing content out there that's quality. If the option to easily push high-quality content faster with less work and over again is there, why not capitalize on it?
Yeah. I think the way I kind of look at it, similar to you, because I hate the term content creator and influencer and all that stuff. I try to not call myself that, but in reality, that's what we are. We are content creators. Because I am kind of in the middle, like I said, I don't feel like I have the experience yet to like really claim a stake as being on the side of like doing things with a camera and with computer programs, Adobe programs, and doing everything. We'll just call it professionally versus social media-ly. But I do feel a little bit like I look at it as everybody now has the ability with no training, with no extra work to kind of churn out decent content. And I think that our attention spans and what we find entertaining these days has been so cheapened that you really don't, like, for instance, I got CapCut last week and I just used a Michael Scott GIF, whatever you call it, just about Total Archery Challenge and shooting that rabbit. That thing just went over 200,000 views today. For a guy like me with like 2,400 followers, like, what the hell? And I mean,
that's awesome.
I will say, yeah, it's great for me, but it's like I didn't really do any work for that. I mean, granted, I chose a topic that I thought was going to be very relatable for Total Archery Challenge. I happened to post it the week before Big Sky, which is the big Total Archery Challenge. So there were other, influential factors to that. But, like, I didn't have to put in work. I made that, like, in 2 minutes before I was clocking into work, and it's like, my worry is, are we cheapening content to the point, like, what's the next level for a professional? Like, if we're making all of these tools that now everybody and their mother and their brother can make good looking content, how do we separate professionals from everybody else at that? Like, what's the value in taking the next step? What is the next level? Because if now as a professional, you're having to compete with these apps that can basically take the skill set that you've poured your life into and replicate it for everybody to use, like, what is your next step with that?
So again, there's two sides to it. One being, I think the professionalism that we all look up to, while there are so many professionals on social media, to some degree, it is just social media. And as much as social media is changing the way that content is created, that brands and outfitters and all of the companies in the world are gathering content, it's also changing the fact that somebody is a professional at social media. They're a professional, content creator, influencer, ambassador, all of the fun terms that we all use for all of it that really, didn't exist. That game is changing. So to some degree, like that reel that you're talking about, this podcast, all of that, if you're using the AI stuff, you're using these different apps, you're professionally taking advantage of a tool that's there for you, which is awesome. It's still, at the end of the day, you're putting those clips in order. You're picking the parts of those clips. You're picking the audio that's going to get you there. You're picking the little added whatever that gets you there. Michael Scott, him doing his thing, that's still you. The day that it becomes, this is my video library, here, do stuff to the computer, okay, then I can see that takes it all out of there. But as far as social media goes, it's funny. It's cool. It's interesting. All of the different things that people can do. And there's still an artistry behind that. And then you step outside of the social media realm, back into YouTube or television or movies, and that's still where people are truly, like, that's where the professionalism shows through. I mean, you scroll through YouTube, there are hundreds of thousands of incredibly talented videographers, photographers, random people that have their own thing going on that are unbelievable, that are doing it all, and using fancy apps or not, at the end of the day, we're all still creating, which is part of it that I think is what all this is for, to kind of circle that all together. We're all being able to create in our own way, whether it's on a phone, a several $1,000 camera, or, whatever else. It's still a unique way of being able to capture what we're seeing. And I think it's great.
Yeah, one of the points one of my buddies was making in terms of, like, you've got influencers. So I'm not going to say that, like, there are like, when I talk influencers, I'm talking the guys who their content is solely look at my brand, look at my brand, look at my brand, look over and over and over. And it's not even like, there's no creative element. It's just a picture of a video just showing a product. What he was bringing up is, because of all these apps, because of the advances in, like, not necessarily AI in terms of what we're talking about right now, but just pre-made, pre-template type stuff, a guy like, let's just say, random guy Bob decides, he's going to start making content of all of his different brands and gears, and he's doing things with these apps, and now he starts getting attention from companies. Meanwhile, you started years ago. Like I said, it's been a grind. You've been learning all the ins and outs of like true videography and photography. You're not getting noticed. And he was kind of talking to like the meritocracy of it, and granted, at the end of the day, life's not fair. And I get that. But sure. I think his worry is that there are a lot of people who are really pouring their souls into the craft, and it's kind of like musicians. You go to Nashville, how many amazing guitarists it could rival any of the legendary guitarists that we all know and love. There's thousands and thousands of people who can play guitar just as good, but they never get noticed. And meanwhile, this girl's dad is a record executive. I think I talked about this in the last one, and she gets the shot. Does that bother you at all? Do you even care about that? I mean, you're already kind of doing your thing, but if you were like somebody, you're still up and coming, and you're really trying to like do something, make a career out of photography and videography, should you be worried about that at all? That people who are not putting the same amount of work in are going to possibly get the deals, get the attention, get the career out of it with not even a quarter of the work that you've put into it?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, for sure. But it also depends on what are you doing it for. Is your goal in all of this to just get famous and become an influencer and have all these cool brands send you free shit and not pay you to do it and just say, hey, look at me? Okay. Then yeah, go ahead, do all that. Is your goal because you love photography, because you love videography or sound design? You know, my buddy Thomas is a great example. Dude is one of the best sound designers that I've heard in the hunting space. And, you know, that's his thing. That's his passion. He could care less about Bob getting some cool deal with Nike to show off his sneakers. For me, yeah, I mean, to some degree, does it kind of suck? Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people that I'm friends with that put out mediocre content that brands love, that people love. Also, their audience is a completely different ballgame. You know, yeah. To some degree, the majority of the population isn't hardcore hunters. They're not hardcore camera people. They're not hardcore fishermen. They're coming out of the city. They have a moderate interest in it. It's entertaining. They're beginners, or they've never done it before, and they're looking at it from an outside perspective. So to most of that, the level is going to go over their head. If it's a high level content, if it's a high level demonstration or podcast or video, it's going to go over their head. So the majority of the people that are going to view that content are going to be starting or from the outside looking in. And I think that's something that we forget, you know, just like you with this podcast, for example, you know, a lot of your audience is going to be just like yourself, coming into it from the last couple of years or just starting. You know, it's the same way Okayest Hunter does so well because it's average. Like that's the experience is the average experience. Most people aren't doing what I'm doing. You know, most people aren't spending a decade working in the outdoor industry, half of that on the road, traveling the country, guiding and taking pictures. My life experiences don't relate to 99.8% of the population. Your experiences do. So it kind of circles into that, like the content, you know, those guys that are, you know, Bob, he's a heck of a lot more relatable. His look on it is going to just flourish, where mine, you know, having done it for 30 years, isn't going to be the same.
So for guys who, we'll close it out and saying, you know, do what you do. And I think the important thing there that you brought up is having a reason. And I think that's kind of the grounding principle behind it is, if I'm saying that I'm doing the podcast and have the show and getting into photography, if I'm saying that I'm doing it because I love it then I guess it shouldn't bother me that someone else loves the idea of chasing, like you were saying, chasing free shit from Instagram content. I think that's kind of a good, like, check yourself moment where it's like, what are you really doing this for? Because if you're doing it because you love it, you shouldn't really give a shit about what anybody else is doing at all. So I guess, yeah, if you're sitting back and you're worried that people are going to pass you by and they're not doing the work I'm doing and they're getting all the attention, well, then I guess you're really chasing attention. And if it's that important to you, then you need to change your trajectory, so I think that was a good point. For guys who are getting into photography or people who are just they want to take a camera with them into the woods. They want to start capturing things for themselves to be able to show their friends and family what they do out in the woods. Because a lot of us, even if you grow up with a hunting family or hunting friends, a lot of the times you're out there by yourself. And we want to relay our experiences. Do you have any kind of tips to guys like just wanting to start off with, like, maybe they have a GoPro or maybe they just have a mirrorless camera? Is there any good starting point on certain aspects of hunts to pay attention to kind of make your content a little bit better?
A lot of that question goes,
that's kind of open-ended, I know.
Yeah. It goes a lot into what your end goal is with the content. Is your goal to showcase what you're seeing? Is your goal to tell your story? Is your goal to go, look at me? Or is it to just show the world? So pick that. Everybody wants to know a story. If that story is very basic, whatever, can do, and you can do whatever you want. If you want to tell your why, then what are the clips, what are the pictures that help tell that story? Ultimately, that's what it is being able to tell that story. Every movie, every TV show, every YouTube show, every podcast is a story that's engaging. That's why they're successful. Yeah.
One of the biggest mysteries to me in terms of, and I haven't tried to I don't think I'll ever get into like the self-filming hunts thing, especially not yet, just because I'm too inexperienced as a hunter to screw it up even more trying to catch it all on film. I need to focus on my hunt still. But a lot of the good elements and what has always been a mystery to me is kind of the B-roll stuff, that just it's not the main clip, it's not the main commentary. How do you go about kind of picking out just that background B-roll type stuff? A lot of times you see people, it's just like a shot of just like a leaf blowing for 3 seconds or whatever. What kind of stuff catches your eye as engaging that you want to film that type of stuff? And then how do you decide what to work into a video? Or do you just kind of always have a camera rolling and then just go back over it?
I try not to always have a camera rolling, mainly because then I have to, go through all that footage, which obviously isn't a good time. But for me, it's all of the things that you see that are happening, that happen naturally, that you overlook. Those are kind of your B-roll stuff. You're getting out of the truck, the wind blowing, the knocking an arrow, even to the point of like drawing back, like all of those things. And you get that tight that's right here, all of those things that come back, or, the safety clicking off. Those are B-roll shots, but they're telling the story. They're things that we all know that are happening. But if you're not there, if you just went from like, hey, we're in the truck, and then we went to sitting there, and then we shot the turkey.
Right.
That's the story. It's the same thing. It's just very boring.
Yeah.
And it's very bland. And you're missing all of the parts that we as hunters know goes into it. But now you get to see it, and you can cut it up. So I think those, again, it's all about telling the story. Those are the things that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's the best way I've ever heard it explained, of all the times I've tried to look up like what's a strategy for that. I've never heard anybody kind of explain it that way, where it's all the little elements that we experience out there. So, I think that was a great answer. That really kind of clarifies, like you're saying, remember that you're trying to tell a story, not just we went from A to B, what happened in the middle there, all those little extras. I think that's pretty cool. Another question I had kind of related to, it could be the video you had alluded to, taking like a close-in shot when a guy's got their bow drawn back. Do you tend, and this is a selfish photography question, do you tend to kind of shoot a little bit wider and then in post-editing kind of crop into however you like it? Or have you gotten to the point where you kind of know the shot, what you want in your head, and you try to get it right in the camera the first time? Because there's a lot of times I'll take a picture, and even though I think in the moment, like I'm capturing the way I want it to look right now in the camera, once I get it onto the computer, I end up cropping in or moving things around, and it kind of ends up being a totally different picture. So what's your method, or what is your kind of your recommendation on something like that? Should you be conservative in the shot, or should you just go for, like I said, sometimes you take a picture of a person and then in editing you crop it real close in and you're like, oh, that looks really cool, and I didn't see that in the moment to take that picture that way.
Part of that's just as you develop your style of photography. In part, I'm a bad person to ask that because my main photography lens is a 200 to 500. So everything's tight. Everything's those super close details. And a lot of it's just because the things that like waterfowl, for example, a dog coming back at 500 millimeters, I can shoot it 50 yards away and it looks like it's right here, which is the point.
Right.
So for me, I don't often do that where I'm cropping in a ton. I will, and saying that, I do it often when I see a detail that I physically couldn't have gotten close enough to, just with the lenses, the camera, whatever, and I'll change that. I've got some pictures of dogs' eyes that you can see the reflection of a hunter or the decoys or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll crop that in and pick it up. But then you start to worry about noise and pixelation and all those other things that are limiting factors by how that picture was taken in the first place. You can't shoot an image at 25 millimeters, 24, and then just crop it in and make it look like 200 and still have a good image. Right. Lightroom AI denoise, you can get pretty close, but it's still not going to
talk
look.
About.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's kind of alluding back to like, is it cheating? That question of, is it cheating? Because that is unreal. I saw an ad for it somewhere when it first came out. I don't know. I think I updated the program or app, whatever you want to call it, Lightroom Classic, like maybe a month ago, 2-3 weeks ago, whatever. And I was like, I wonder how good this is. It is unbelievable. I had a shot from the zoo, and
good.
It was of a meerkat indoors. And because I had just screwed the exposure up, I didn't pay attention. It was basically a black picture, and I jacked up the exposure to where it was like an acceptable exposure, and then I hit it with that denoise, and it looks crystal clear. It was a complete black picture that would have been trash. You would have never tried to even do anything with, and it looks like a great photo. Now, do you find that, like, for a guy like me who screwed it all up, I got a black picture, and then I can churn that out? How does that make you feel with, like, the experience you got? Or is it, like you said, just like it's an awesome tool that everyone gets to use and we all get better pictures at the end?
Hey, that's why we shoot digital. If we wanted no excuses, we'd all shoot film. There's a lot of pictures that I took in Alaska when I was first starting that I will, when I finally get the time, it might be a year from now, but I'll go back through because I know there are hundreds of images that I couldn't save because they were shot in too low of light And now I can save them by bumping the exposure up and being able to get those image. And they're great other than the fact that they were too dark and the noise was too bad. So I didn't do anything with them. Now I can go back into those pictures and, I have years of photos like that. If it's a great tool, and I'm super stoked about it. I use it all the time.
Yeah, that's a bad part about it though, is I tend to find myself wanting to use it when it's not really totally necessary. You could play with the sharpening and the luminance or whatever it is and kind of smooth it out. But then I'm like, or I can click this button here, and then you got to wait for like a minute for it to go for each picture. And then your 40 minutes that you're going to spend just going through 10 pictures ends up being 3 hours. But do you tend to have you said you work mostly with like a 2 to 500. Do you have another favorite lens that you like to work with, or that you felt like you really learned a lot from? That's one thing I've noticed as I've bought a couple different lenses in different focal lengths and different apertures and stuff. I feel like I've been able to learn something new from each lens that I can translate into using other lenses. Do you have another favorite that you like to go to?
If I was going to tell somebody to buy a lens, like their first full frame professional lens, it would be a 24 to 120 or 24 to 105 is the Canon equivalent, because it's close enough that you get that like top end of a 70 to 200. You have all of your wide, and you can film on it. You can take pictures on it. It's usually like an f4, so you can get enough light that if you want to do nighttime stuff, daytime, anything in between, you're in pretty good shape. And I think it's one of those lenses that you can really capitalize on. We're talking cropping in. You want to bump in at 120? Yeah, you can do it. Make it look like you shot it at 200. Awesome.
Yeah.
You also, to some degree, you can save a lot of money. The first 24 to 120 that I bought was like $450 used. And it's a great lens. It's on one of my cameras still today. I've, used it forever as a run and gun. Like, hey, I don't know what we're going to shoot today. Go from a tree stand to a duck blind to a river, in the boat, in somebody's house, anywhere you want to take it. That's an amazing lens if you've got to pick one for one body.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I have what is it? I just got a wide angle. I think it's like a 16 to 50 maybe. And then I've got the kit lens, which is like, I think 55 to 135, something like that. And then I have a 50, 55. And I find myself whenever, like you were saying, whenever I'm in a situation, that's one thing I've wondered from a professional photographer, because each one of those lenses it has a different function. It has a different reason you want to use it. But when you're out, like you said, on a shoot, do you take multiple lenses and just swap them in a situation? Because I find myself just the kit lens that came with the camera is, like you said, it's like my run and gun, because I can kind of cover a pretty wide variety of styles that I want to use. Whereas I do like my 55, but I'm not going to go, like when I go shoot that archery event, like I'm not going to have that on the camera, because you're so limited to what it does.
I'm going to interrupt you there because I have a point about that 55.
Yeah.
Take that lens. This is a fun learning experience. Take that lens, take only that lens, go out and shoot all day and learn how you have to physically move your body to be able to get the same shot. If you want a close-up, you've got to get in close. If you want a big wide angle, you've got to actually move and be able to change your perspective up and down. It's an incredible exercise that I think everybody should do, of how you can really make a picture different with moving your body, framing, and how you obviously expose the image.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I have done that a little bit with the 55, and that I feel like that's such a fun lens. That's what I use for the show. But then, like you were saying, it does force you, like when you have that fixed focal length, it really does force you to work for a shot. Whereas your more telephoto lens, you can kind of get lazy or stand back. But do you ever run in, because I've heard people talk about like when you're shooting, as a photographer, like you need to go unnoticed. How does that work? I was thinking, how does that work in a hunting scenario when you get these pictures of dogs that are, obviously you're shooting them on, like you said, you're 2 to 500. It looks like you're right up in there. How do you learn to set up as a photographer, stay out of the way of the hunt, but still be right there in the hunt to catch all those details?
In part, it's because of being a hunter. I understand how the dog's going to work. I understand how the ducks are going to work. I understand how the people are going to act. It's the same with deer hunting. I know what the deer are going to do. I know what my hunter's going to do. And I know what's happening. Elk hunting, same thing. So you understand what's going on. Duck hunting, for example, is by far the easiest to shoot because we shoot all the ducks. Everybody gets out of the blinds to go get all the ducks. The dogs running around. I go lay in the decoys most of the time. Like I am almost always laying on the ground or sitting on the ground because I know where, the dog's going to come back to its owner or its blind. So you know exactly where it's coming every single time. Unless it's a misbehaved dog, obviously. But so go lay in the mud. I mean, that's what it is.
That's what I was wondering, because I noticed a lot of because most of your photos are very duck hunting related, or a lot of the really good shots of the dogs that you've taken. And I was thinking earlier, I was like, where is he in context to where the hunters are? Because like I said, I've never duck hunted, so I don't know what it looks like once the guns have all fired, and I know you shoot the duck, and I know the bird or the dog goes out and gets it. But yeah, you have shots like right off of a decoy. Like it's like, is he just hanging out there in the decoys while they're shooting over him? Like, how did this work?
Not on purpose. It does happen occasionally, though.
Have you had with that? Have you had any like horror stories or scary moments while you've been out, where you found yourself like in the line of fire or just anything? I mean, with as much as you travel and as much wilderness as you're always in, do you have any like crazy things that have ever happened to you that you kind of hope never happen again?
Honestly, I've been, knock on wood, pretty fortunate on that end of it. We've had some clients that have been not the safest with guns. And if I'm in the guide scenario, I'm very adamant of like, these are the rules. This is how you act. You get maybe a warning. Otherwise, you're going to go sit in the truck and you're going to watch your buddies hunt. And I've also made that comment as the photographer with other guides because I don't care, It's kind of funny. Yeah. Everybody always thinks I'm this super nice guy. I'm really helpful. Most of my friends would probably say the opposite. I have no problem going, hey, this isn't okay. Get the heck out of here. You're done. Because we're all playing with guns. We're all supposed to be having fun. This isn't, hey, Joe shot my arm off because we were out having fun today. Right. So I take that stuff super seriously and try to, and I think we all should. I've also gotten my ears rung enough times that like I can't afford to do that very many times. But and even you talk about dangerous stuff. I've had 1,000-pound brown bears several feet from me. I've had cubs smell my boots with mom a couple yards past her.
No.
Had gotten bluff charged them back, but never had anything where I was like seriously like, this isn't good. We're really going to be in a bad situation here, which I'm super fortunate and blessed to not have. But a lot of it too is trying to be prepared. I think the worst thing, of all of the random stuff that I've ever done was on the fire department when I was on a volunteer department. I broke my ribs in a house fire.
Yeah.
So all of the travels are all over the place. The only thing that's ever really happened was at home.
Now, when you, how often is, like you were saying, you've had brown bears or you've had bears real close. You've had the cubs on you. Are most of the time when you see a photo of, say, a bear like that, how close are you trying to get to a situation like that? Or like if you're, I guess specifically like a bear situation, because that poses the most danger. How close do you get to those animals when you're taking your picture? Because I mean, you can with 500 millimeters, obviously you can get pretty far out. But is there like how far does that lens actually work? How close are you having to get still to execute a good shot, even with a big lens like that?
I want to be 100 to 75 yards.
Which is not very far from a bear. No.
So where I guided in Alaska, if you've ever seen a bear stand on top of a waterfall catching a salmon, that like iconic Alaska bear picture, I lived there for 2 years in that national park. There, it's like legally required to be 50 yards. So I tried to be 75 to 100. It gave me enough room to be able to move away if that bear started coming closer. It gave me plenty of room to react. It also got me close enough that I knew that I was going to be able to pick the details that I wanted to. And in part, what I want to be is probably closer than most people want to be, but also because I spent, a total of 10 months taking pictures of those bears. You can only take so many pictures of a bear doing the same thing every day for 10 months straight. So then you start wanting to get, details. You start wanting to be able to see different parts. You want claws on rocks, like teeth, when they bite a salmon and the eggs squirt out. Like you want those pictures. You don't just want like a full. Yeah. So that's where you start getting into that, like, all right, 75 yards is pretty cool. 50 yards, we're right on the edge of getting yelled at, but it's pretty great.
So how did that story with the Cubs coming up to you, how did that play out? And what do you do? Do you just sit still in that scenario, I assume? Like, what happened there?
Well, so where our camp, we've got the lodge and it's all national park, but they call it the developed area, and bears will just walk through camp. Well, I came around a building right as sow and a couple cubs came around, and it happened to be one of the sows that really doesn't like people. I don't know if you've been around cattle, you can kind of identify cattle based on like mannerisms and like little markings. It's the same with bears.
Yeah.
And especially when they have cubs, they're very easily identifiable of who is who and what their personality is and if they're going to be a pain in the ass or not. But so this one came around the corner and I just happened to be like right next to a building and just kind of tucked as close as I could to the building as they came around, and the cubs just are at, 15 yards. They come up to me and I just start talking to them. It's strictly like a communication as they understand I'm not scared. Also, they know I'm there, and it's just a constant like sound. Yeah. Where if all of a sudden you're quiet and then shouted, you're going to scare the bear away, which is great, but also that's how you cause a reaction. So I'm talking, hey buddy, what you doing? Go back to mom, get out of here. Sorry, mom, I'm not trying to steal your kid. It's fluffy. I'd put it in my backpack if you'd let me, but you're not going to. So like, move along. We'll see you later on the river. I have stuff to do. I'm trying to work here. Just general banter back and forth. And sometimes that's enough to like scare the bears out, which is great. Yeah. Sometimes they come up, in that instance, they sniffed my boots. And now I start slowly knocking on the building next to me, getting louder and louder and trying to like eventually get it to a volume that they don't want to put up with anymore without just outright, really making that cub uncomfortable where mom now has to intervene.
Yeah, that's gotta be, I guess you learn that from experience, but I think, most people's reaction, my reaction before hearing that would be to like really try to like shock that, you know what I mean? Like yell at it and scare it away. Mm-hmm. But to your point, that could be the very thing that sets mom off to come tear your ass up.
Yeah. And if you've been around cattle or you've been around like big dogs, it's very similar. Horses, kind of the same thing. You're reading mannerisms. You're paying attention to the things that you can't hear, and you're watching them.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, this bear is not freaked out yet. Great, we've got some time. Or, okay, this bear's getting kind of agitated. What are we gonna do? And it's time. You start to learn that stuff very quickly being around them, and then a lot of it's a little bit of luck, just in the like, all right, I made the right decision. But after doing that in the middle of the woods, a couple hundred times, where you're walking down a bear trail and the bear's walking up the trail, and you meet him face to face in thick brush, you start to get comfortable enough to be able to go, all right, this is how we're going to act. This is what we're going to do. And so much of my career was guiding with clients that had never seen a bear before. So I better damn well be comfortable going, all right, guys, you're going to stand here and we're going to let this happen, or move over here, or get out of here, or whatever, but do it slowly and calmly.
So is that for kind of like what you just said, like a lot of your clients have never seen a bear before? When you're in Alaska or out west, I mean, is that a pretty common occurrence then to run into bears? Like, does that happen a lot?
Oh, where I was in Alaska, it happened every single day.
Really?
The park that I was in Alaska is the highest concentration of brown bears in the country, and like second highest in the world. I mean, we would have
insane.
days that there would be 100 adult bears on the river. So if you're not running into a bear, it's probably a really weird day.
Yeah. That's crazy. Because bears kind of, like I said, when you've never had experience with them, they seem like such a solitary animal that, just every now and then you pop into, because it's always such a big story online when family goes hiking through wherever it is and a bear pops out. I can't imagine, like, that's got to be so, I guess it's like anything else, you probably just become desensitized to it, but I can't imagine just being in the vicinity of bears every single day, knowing what they're capable of. Now, were you primarily dealing with like brown bear or black bears, or have you been in any grizzly situations?
All three. On your other point, I would call it educated instead of desensitized. And I say that because the people that become desensitized to bears are the people that bad things happen to. When you start to think that they're not a threat, that they're your friend, that it's not okay, or like that it is okay to be that close and to really interact, that's when you start to have bad things happen. That's how Grizzly Man or whoever, that's how he got eaten, because he was desensitized and he thought the bears were his friends. So it's an education and an understanding, just time more than anything. And I just like to clarify that so that nobody thinks that way, and then what happened to dude up in Alaska happens to somebody else. But
right. No, that's a really good point. Now, do you carry when you're out in those areas?
I always carry bear spray.
I guess I was gonna say you don't have to answer that, but
yeah. No, we carried bear spray, and in the 4 years I was in Alaska, I popped the safety twice. One of them was because the bears were getting close to luggage before we could get it from the plane into cabins, and I knew that there was food involved. So obviously you don't want to teach a bear that like a suitcase might have snacks. Probably a bad idea. So, but I never even had to use it. Was never in a situation with bears that I was like super threatened or that I thought the bear was intentionally coming at me. Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing, man, because being around him, being around him as much as you were, it's like, it seems like a kind of situation where at some point in time, something's got to happen. And so, I mean, that's awesome that you were able to get through that and just experience all of that without getting, anything too serious happening. Because, I mean, you got to live to tell the story of having cubs sniffing your boots. I mean, I don't know anybody else who can say that,
Yeah.
Man, well, what do you got coming up, man? What do you got coming up next? Do you have a certain, Do you spend most of your fall in the elk woods, or are you just kind of all over the place?
Every year's a little different. It sounds like I'll do quite a bit of Western stuff this year. But it's kind of a hard split, between my newfound love of elk hunting and my lifelong love of waterfowl hunting. It also becomes who calls first. If waterfowl clients call first, then I'm going to go duck hunt or goose hunt or whatever it is. But if these big game clients keep calling, then that's where I'll stay. At the moment, it sounds like I'll be out west. I've got a hunt to film this week. Then I go up to Canada next week. Work my way through Wisconsin down to Arkansas for Delta waterfowl at the end of July. And then I'll come back up here for the start of big game season, elk hunting. And then we'll see. There was talk about going back to Canada for duck hunting in the beginning of September, but you never know. It's kind of one of those, we just take it as it goes, and I usually end up zigzagging across the country about 43 times.
But I guess if you had to choose, you could only shoot one style or one game animal again for the rest of your life. I guess it doesn't even have to be a game animal. Of all of your experiences, if you could only follow one animal again for the rest of your life, what would you have that be?
I would probably say Canadian geese. But
why is that?
A lot of it is just because of they're my favorite waterfowl species, and a lot of that was just how I grew up. That was what I started duck and goose hunting with, was early season goose in Wisconsin with my dad. We did that for a long time, and it wasn't till later, I think I was in my 20s before I really started duck hunting specifically. Everything was just goose hunting. So it, kind of the way you get started in it, your first love.
Does that kind of offer, I assume, I feel like duck hunting or goose hunting kind of offers a lot of different opportunity for photos as well. Because if you're like doing deer elk would be cool, but you're kind of stuck right in one spot. I feel like waterfowl seems like there's a lot of action going on. So it'd probably be a lot more fun to shoot, I would think.
There's a lot more parts to the story of waterfowl hunting. You've got dogs, you've got multiple people, you've got the interactions between multiple people who also don't have to be quiet, which makes things a lot more fun. Elk hunting, you've got multiple people typically along on a stalk or in the hunt, but like most of it's pretty quiet, and there's not a whole lot of like reaction unless something really epic happens. But you've also hiked several miles for that to happen. And, you hike 1 mile, it looks like the same the rest of the mile. So you're right. Waterfowl hunting is a lot more engaging as a photographer, videographer. And I think that's part of why you see a lot more people who are in the waterfowl world. As you start following photographers, there's a whole rabbit hole of waterfowl guys who are incredible, super talented. And it's just kind of the same with turkey hunting, actually. There's a very huge number of guys that are big turkey photographers, videographers. Like, that's their thing. Where, like, there's not that many whitetail guys.
There's just like there's so many different types of waterfowl. And, there's different types of turkeys. But within the animal itself, like, a deer we look at a big deer and we're like, oh, shit, that's a big deer. That's cool. But, like, while they're a beautiful animal, they don't offer a lot of variance in terms of, like, you shoot the antlers, but what else is interesting about a deer? An elk. You shoot them, try to get a lip curl, but what else is really that interesting to capture in a single picture? Whereas if you're talking a duck or a turkey, every feather is different. They're iridescent, they look like sometimes they're shining purple and green. The same with waterfowl. There's so many like interesting elements to those animals that I feel like I said, just kind of offer so much more opportunity to capture really cool details versus, well, there's a large rack on a deer. Like, we've all seen that, you know. But
yeah, go to the Iowa Deer Classic.
I did this year, and it was, God, that was fun, but I don't know if I'm going to go again next year. I guess I won't ever, if my project ever gets to a point where something like that's necessary for like the business, I'll do it. But I tried going up there with my kids too. I took a 4-year-old, well, he was 3, and a 1-year-old at the time. My God, dude, it was not something I would probably do again. Like I said, it was cool to see certain people, but there's not much to look at other than things that I'm like telling my wife, oh, I want to buy that. And she's giving me a scowl because I've already spent so much money on hunting crap that I don't bring home enough meat to make it pay off. Well, hey, man, I don't want to keep you around for too much longer. Let everybody know where they can find you online because like we've been talking about, guys, if you're not following along with Keagan, you need to check his Instagram out and see the work that he's doing because he's excellent at it. If you're into photography, he's a very good person to kind of pick apart the different elements of his pictures and what he does. If you're not specifically trying to learn photography, you just have a wide array of just really cool pictures. And like we've said, your pictures all have a feel or a story to them. So let everybody know where they can follow along with you.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, Wildlife Photog Media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the things. It's cool to be able to showcase the life that I'm living and be able to tell people why this, wildlife is as interesting as it is, and how it changes and evolves over the years. But thanks for having me on, man. It's been great to get to chit chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming on, and thanks for all the knowledge that you shared, all the good conversation, as well as all of, guys, you won't hear it because I'm going to edit all the bad crap out, but I was on my B game today, so thanks for hanging in there. Like I said before the show, I was chasing around some wild ass kids, so I had to hop on the call, and I'm all flustered and pissed off still. But well, hey, man, I appreciate you coming on. Guys, make sure you're following along with Keagan over at Wildlife Photog Media. I didn't get that wrong, did I? Got that right?
No, you nailed it, buddy.
All right. Make sure you're following him. You guys won't be disappointed with his content. Like I said, he puts out amazing photos and videos, and the fun reels that you've been putting out. Those are awesome as well. Make sure you're following us. We're at Antler Feather Co. on Instagram, as well as YouTube, Facebook, all the rest of the social media stuff. The one thing I'm going to ask you guys, the theme of season 3 is share the show. That allows me to keep bringing great guests on. And when we have guests like we had tonight, we all get to learn something new. And ultimately, that's going to make you more deadly in the woods. So for Keagan and Vince, this is the Antler and Feather Co. podcast. You are listening to the Antler and Feather Co. podcast.